Continuing with Book 3, Chapter 18. Leela said, I have much consolation in you, and now I will console my sorrowing heart. So saying, she made a sign for the assembly to break and rose from her royal seat. She entered the inner apartment and sat by the side of the dead body of her lord, hidden under the heap of flowers, and began to reflect within herself. She thought, oh, wonderful magic that presents these people of my palace situated in the same manner outside myself as I saw them seated within me in my meditation. Oh, how great is the extent of this delusion that contains the same high hills and the same spacious forests of palm and pintala trees, situated both outside and within me. Like a mirror, shows the reflection of hills within itself as they are without it. So the reflector of the intellect presents the whole creation inwardly as it has outside of itself. I must now invoke the goddess of wisdom to determine which of these is illusion and which is sober and certain reality. So thinking, she worshipped and invoked the goddess and immediately saw Saraswati in the form of a virgin. She made the goddess sit on an elevated seat, and having seated herself low upon the ground before her, asked that divine power to tell the truth. Leela said, be gracious, O goddess, and clear this doubt of your supplicant, for it is your wisdom that first framed this beautiful system of the universe and knows the truth. Tell me, O great goddess, about what I am now going to relate to you, for it is by your favor alone that I may be successful to know it. I saw the pattern of this world in the intellect, which is more transparent than the ethereal sphere, and so extensive that it contains millions and millions of miles in its small space. No definite words can express what is known as the calm, cool, and indescribable light. This is called unintelligible intelligence and is without any cover or support. Nirvarana Nirviti. It exhibits the reflections of space in the course of time and those of the sky in its light and the course of events concentrating in itself. Thus, images of the world are to be seen both within and outside the intellect, and it is hard to distinguish the real and unreal ones between them. The goddess asked, tell me, fair maiden, what is the nature of the real world, and what you mean by its unreality? Leela replied, I know the real is where I find myself sitting here and looking upon you as seated in this place. What I mean by unreal is the state in which I saw my husband in the ethereal region some time ago, because emptiness has no limit of time or place in it. The goddess replied, real creation cannot produce an unreal figure. A similar cause cannot produce a dissimilar effect. Leela replied, but, O goddess, we often see dissimilar effects produced from unreal, similar causes. The earth and an earthen pot are similar in substance, Yet one melts in water and the other holds in water. The goddess said, yes. When an act is done by the aid of auxiliary means, there the effect is found to be somewhat different from the primary cause. Thus the earthen pot, being produced by the auxiliary appliances of fire and the potter's wheel and the like, differs in its quality from the original clay. Say, O beautiful maiden, what were the causes of your husband being born in this earth? The same led to his birth in the other world also. When the soul has fled from here, how can the material earth follow him? And what auxiliary causes can there be in connection with this cause? Whenever there is a contributing cause in addition to the apparent cause, everyone usually attributes the result to some unknown prior cause or motive. Leela said, I think, O goddess, that the expansion of my husband's memory caused of his regenerations, because it is certain that memory is the cause of the reproduction of objects before us. The goddess replied that memory is an aerial substance, and its productions are as unsubstantial as itself. Leela said, yes, I find memory to be an airy thing and its reproduction of my husband, and all other things within me are only empty shadows in the mind. The goddess replied, therefore your husband and all those other things that appear to your sight in your reverie truly were reproductions, my daughter. And so is the appearance of all things I see in this world. Leela said, tell me, O goddess, in order to remove my conception of the reality of the world, and how the false appearance of my formless Lord was produced before me by the unreal world. The goddess replied, as an illusory world appeared a reality to you before, you had memories of it, so you must know that all this is unreal from what I am going to relate to you. In some parts, Saraswati speaking, in some parts of the sphere of consciousness, there is a great fabric of the world, with the glassy vault of the firmament for its roof on all sides. Mount Meru, the polar axle, or mountain, is its pillar, surrounded by the regions of the 10 sides like statues carved upon it. The 14 regions are like so many apartments of it. And the hollow vault containing the 3 worlds is lighted by the lamp of the luminous sun. Its corners are inhabited by living creatures resembling ants. They are surrounded by mountains appearing as anthills in the sight of Brahman, the prime lord of creatures, and the primeval patriarch of many races of men. All animal beings are like worms confined in cocoons of their own making. The blue skies above and below are like the root of this house, beset by bodies of departed spirits, resembling groups of gnats buzzing in the air. The fleeting clouds are the smoke of this house, or like spider webs in its corners. And the hollow air is full of aerial spirits, like poles of bamboos filled with flies. There are also the playful spirit of gods and demigods hovering over human houses, like swarms of busy buzzing bees around vessels of honey. Here and here, amidst the cavity of heaven, earth, and the infernal regions, lay tracts of land well watered by rivers, lakes, and the sea on all sides. In a corner of this land was a secluded place of ground, sheltered by hills and crags about it. In this secluded spot, sheltered by hills, rivers, and forests, there lived a holy Brahman man with his wife and children, free from disease and care of grief and fear of a ruler. He passed his days in his fire worship and hospitality with the produce of his cattle and land. Chapter 19. Story of a former Vasishtha and Arundhati. Vasishtha relating the story of Leela, Saraswati speaking to Leela. In this age, in attire, in his earning and wealth, in all his actions and pursuits, this holy man was equal to his namesake, except in his profession. The one being a secular man, the other the priest of the royal family. His name was Vasishtha. His wife was Arundhati, fair as the moon and like the star of the same name visible from earth. She resembled her namesake, the priestess of the solar race, in her virtues and parts, and in all things, except in her soul and body. She passed her time in true love and affection in the company of her husband, and she was his all in the world, with her sweet, smiling face resembling a Kamunda flower. Once this holy man had been sitting under the shady sorara trees on the tableland of his native hill, when he saw the ruler of the land passing below with his gaudy train. He was accompanied by all the members of the royal family and his troops and soldiers. They were going to a hunt, with a clamor that resounded in the hills and forests. The white flapper fans shed a stream of moonlight. The lifted banners appeared like a moving forest, and the white umbrellas made a canopy of the sky. The air was filled with dust, raised by the horses' hoofs, and the lines of elephants with their high pavilion saddles seemed like moving towers that protect them from the heat of the sun and the hot wind. The loud uproar of the party, resembling the roar of a whirlpool, made wild animals run on all sides. Shining gems and jewels were flashing all about on the bodies in the party. The holy man saw this procession and thought to himself, "Oh, how charming is royalty, filled with such splendor and prosperity. Ah, how shall I become the monarch of all the 10 signs, and have such a retinue of horse, elephants, and foot soldiers, with a similar train of flags, flappers, and blazing umbrellas? When will the breeze gently blow the fragrance of kunda flowers and the powdered dust of lotuses to my bedchamber to lull me and my consorts to sleep?" When shall I adorn the faces of my chambermaids with camphor and sandal paste, and enlighten the faces of the four quarters with my fair fame, like the moonbeams decorate the night? With these thoughts, the holy man determined that, for the rest of his life, he would apply himself vigilantly to the austerities of his religion. Last, he was overtaken by infirmities, which shattered his body like the sheets of snowfall batter the blooming lotuses in the lake. Seeing his approaching death, his faithful wife was fading away with fear, like a vine withers at the departure of spring, for fear of the summer heat. Arundhati began to worship me, as you yourself have, in order to obtain the boon of immortality, which is hard to be had. She prayed, "Ordain, O goddess, that the spirit of my Lord may not depart from his tomb after his death." I granted her request. After some time, Vasishtha, the holy man, died, and his empty spirit remained in the emptiness of that home, by virtue of the excessive desire and merit of acts of his former state of existence. This aerial spirit of the holy man assumed the shape of a mighty man on earth. He became the victorious monarch of three realms. By his might, he subjugated the surface of the earth. By his valor, he conquered the high mountains of the gods. By his kind protection, the Netherlands were under his sway. He was like a raging fire to the forest of his enemies, and like the steadfast Mount Meru, amidst the rushing winds of business on all sides. He was like the sun, expanding the lotus-like hearts of the virtuous. To the eyes of women, he was like the god Kama. He was the model of all learning, and the all-giving, wish-fulfilling tree to his suitors. He was the footstool of great scholars. He was like the full moon, shedding ambrosial beams of enlightened rule all around. But after the holy Brahmins had died and his dead body had disappeared into the forms of elementary particles in air, and his airy spirit had rested in the aerial intellectual soul within the empty space of his house, his holy Brahmin widow, Arundhati, was pining away in her sorrow, and her heart was rent in twain like a dried pea pod. She became a dead body like her husband. Her spirit, shuffling off its mortal coil, resembled its subtle and immortal form, in which it met the departed ghost of her husband. She advanced to her Lord as rapidly as a river runs to meet the sea below its throne. She was as cheerful to join him as a cluster of flowers inhale the spring air. The houses, lands, and all the immovable properties and movable riches of the holy Brahman Vasishtha still exist in that rocky village. It has been only 8 days since the souls of this loving pair were reunited in the hollow vault of their house. Chapter 20. Saraswati explained Leela's former life as Arundhati. Saraswati said to Leela, that Brahman who I described before, the one who became a monarch on earth, is the same as your husband. His wife, Arundhati, is no other than yourself, the best of them. You two are the same pair, now reigning over this realm, resembling a pair of doves in your nuptial love, and the gods Shiva and Parvati in your night. I have related your past lives to you, so you may know the individual soul to be only air, and that knowledge of its reality is an error. False knowledge casts its reflection on consciousness and causes its error also. Errors in the senses breed errors in the mind. This makes you doubtful of the truth and untruth of the two states of the material and the intellectual world. Therefore, the question, which is true and which is untrue, has no better answer than that all creations are equally false and unsubstantial. Vasishtha said, hearing these words of the goddess, Leela was confused in her mind. With her eyes staring with wonder, she addressed her softly. Leela said, how is it, O goddess, that your words are so incoherent with truth? You make us the same as the Brahman couple who are in their own house. We are sitting here in our palace. How is it possible that the small space of the room in which my husband's body is lying could contain those spacious lands and hills in the 10 sides of the sky? It is as impossible as confining an elephant in a mustard seed, or a gnat fighting with a body of lions in a nutshell. It is as incredible to believe a lotus seed contains a hill, or to be devoured by a little bee, or that peacocks are dancing, hearing the roaring of clouds in a stream in a dream. O great goddess of gods, it is equally improbably to say that this earth with all its mountains and other things is contained within the small sphere of a sleeping room. Therefore, O goddess, please explain this mystery clearly to me, because it is by your favor only that the learned are cleared of their questions. The goddess Saraswati said, hear me, fair maiden, I did not tell you a lie. Transgression of the law is a thing unknown to us. The law is non ritam vadeta. Never tell an untruth. It is I who establish the law when others are about to break it. If I should slight the law, who else is there who would observe it? The individual soul of the village Brahman saw within itself and in his own house the image of this great kingdom. Just as his departed spirit now sees the same in its empty void. Therefore, both these states are equally ideal. After death, you lost the memories of your former lives, just like one loses memories of waking events when in the dream state. All are like the appearance of the three worlds in a dream, or their formation in the imagination, or like the description of warfare in an epic poem, or like water in the mirage of a sandy desert. The hills and houses seen in the empty space of the Brahman's house were nothing but the capacity of his own mind to form the images of its fancy and receive the eternal external impressions like a reflecting mirror. All these, though unreal, appear as real substances on account of the reality of consciousness, which is seated in the cavity of the innermost sheath of the body and reflects the images. But these images derive from the memories of unreal objects of the world and are as unreal as those objects which cast their reflections upon consciousness. Waves rising in the river of a mirage are as unreal as the mirage itself. Know that this chair, sitting in this room of your house, as well as myself and yourself and everything else about us, are only the reflections of our consciousness, without which nothing would be perceptible. Our dreams and fallacies, our desires and fantasies, and also our notions and ideas serve as the best evidence to understand this truth, that nothing is true beside the subjective mind, which creates and forms, produces and presents all objects to our view. The spirit of the Brahman resided in the emptiness of his house, the body, with the seas, forests, and the earth within itself, like a bee lives in the lotus. Thus, the habitable earth, with everything it contains, is situated in a small cell in one corner of consciousness, like a spot of flimsy cloud in the sky. The house of the holy Brahman was situated in the same locality of consciousness, which contains all the worlds in one of its atomic particles. Every atom of the intelligent soul contains unnumbered worlds within worlds, enough to remove your doubt of the Brahman being able to see an entire kingdom within the space of his intellect. Leela asked, how can we be the Brahmin couple when they died only 8 days before, and we have been reigning here for so many years? The goddess replied, in reality, there is neither any limit of time or space, or any distance of place or length of time. Hear me tell you the reason why. As the universe is the reflection of the divine mind, so are infinity and eternity but representations of himself. Listen to what I tell you about how we form the idea of time and its subdivisions, whether a moment or an age. It is the same way that we make distinctions among individuals that are me, you, and this or that person. As soon as one feels the lack of senses after his death, he forgets his former nature and thinks himself to be another being. Then, in the twinkling of an eye, he assumes an empty form in the womb of emptiness, and in that container, he thinks within himself, "This is my body with its hands and feet." Thinking about the body, he finds it presented before him. Then he thinks to himself, "I am the son of this father and am so many years old. These are my dear friends, and this is my pleasant home. I was born and became a boy and then grew up to this age. They are all my friends in the same course of their lives." Thus the compact density of the sphere of his soul presents him with many other images that appear to arise in it, as in some part of the world. But they neither rise nor remain in the soul itself, which is as transparent as empty air. They appear to consciousness like a vision in a dream. A person dreaming remains in one place, but sees all manner of things in different places. Everything in the other world appears equally real, just like in his dream. Again, whatever is seen in the other world, the same occurs to men in their present states also. The unreality of the world of dreaming and the reality of the physical world are alike. Just like there is no difference among the waves of the same seawater, so the produced visible creation is the same as the unproduced intellectual world, both of which are equally indestructible. But in reality, the appearance is nothing but a reflection of consciousness, which, apart from the intelligible spirit, is merely an empty void. Although presided over by the intelligible spirit, creation itself is a mere void, its only substance being the intelligible soul, like water is to waves. Waves, though formed of water, are themselves as unreal as the horns of hares. Their appearance as natural objects is altogether false, because they are effects of the auxiliary cause of the winds that have raised them. Therefore, there being no visible object in reality, how can the observer have any idea of materiality which loses its delusion at the moment of his death? After the visible world has disappeared from sight, The soul, in its inner world of the mind, reflects on its memories of creation according to the proper time and place of everything. It remembers its birth, its parents, its age, and its residence, with its learning and all of the pursuits, in the exact manner and order. It thinks of its friends and servants, and of the success and failure of its attempt. The uncreated and incorporeal soul, in its intellectual form, reflects on the events of its created and corporeal state. However, it does not remain in this state for long. Soon after death, it enters a new body to which the properties of the mind and senses are added afterwards in their proper times. It then becomes a baby, finds a new father and mother, and begins to grow. Thus, whether one may perceive it or not, it is all the product of his former memories. Then, upon waking from this state of trance, like a fruit from the cell of a flower, it comes to find that a single moment appeared to it as the period of an age. It was in this way that in times past, King Harishchandra thought one night to be 12 years. One day seemed like a year to those who are separated from their beloved object. Again, it is all false. Whether the birth or death of someone in a dream, or being born and recognizing a father in infancy, or a hungry man imagining he is dining on dainty food. So who would believe a satisfied man after eating who says he is starving? Or one who declares that he is an eyewitness of something he had not seen? Or an empty space full of people? Or that someone found lost treasure in his dream? But this visible world rests in the invisible spirit of God. Like the property of pungency resides in the particles of the pepper seed, and like the painted pictures on a column. But where are the open and clear-sighted eyes to perceive this? The vision of Lila, called samadhi in yoga and clairvoyance, of spiritualism, was the abstract meditation of her Lord in her memory that presented her with a full view of everything imprinted on it. Memory is taken for the whole consciousness, which is identified with God, in whose essence the images of all things are said to be eternally present. Chapter 21. Saraswati explains the practice of meditation, astral travel. Saraswati continues speaking to Leela. Soon after death occasions a lack of physical senses, the light of the world appears to the soul as if he were seeing it with open eyes when he was living. Before him is presented the circle of the sky and its sides with the cycle of its seasons and times. He is shown the deeds of his pious and mundane acts as if they were to continue to eternity. Objects never before seen or thought of also offer themselves to his view, like the sight of his own death in a dream, as if they were the prints in his memory. But the infinity of objects appearing in the empty sphere of the non-physical intellect is mere illusion, and the baseless city of the world, like a castle in the sky, is only the creation of imagination. Memory of the past world makes it known to us. Therefore, the length of a kalpa age and the shortness of a moment are only false impressions, proceeding from the speed and slowness of our thoughts. Therefore, knowledge based upon previous memories or otherwise is of two kinds, and things known without their cause are attributed to divine intelligence. We are also conscious of thoughts that we have not thought of before in our minds, such as we often have in our dreams. Another may remind us of our deceased parents, so we think of them. Sometimes, genius supersedes the province of memory, as in the first creation or discovery of a thing, which afterwards is continued by its memory. According to some, those visible worlds are said to have remained in their ideal state in the divine mind. According to others, there were no pre-existent notions of these in the mind of God. According to some others, the world manifested itself not from memory, but by the power and will of God. Still others maintain it to be the production of a sudden, fortuitous combination of intelligence and atomic principle. Gacchacharya in yoga. Completely forgetting the world is called liberation. That cannot be had if consciousness is attached to what is desirable or is adverse to the undesirable. It is difficult to effect an entire negation of both one's subjective and objective knowledge of his self and the existence of the outer world. Yet, nobody can be freed without the obliteration of both. As the fallacy of taking a rope for a snake is not removed until the meaning of the word snake is known to be inapplicable to the rope, so no one can have rest and peace of mind unless he is convinced of the illusory nature of the world. Even with that, a person who is at peace with himself cannot be wholly at rest without divine knowledge, because even though he has rid himself of the devil of worldliness, the ghost of his inner ignorance may overtake him. The world is certainly a monster in itself, without the knowledge of its author, but the difficulty of knowing the first cause has rendered it an impassable wilderness.